and love, family. Black first. This is Historical Origins. Now, first off, I'd like to say thank you all for tuning in as usual, and thank you all who are subscribed to the channel and who has already been supporting the Midwest Black. It's going pretty good, and if you're new to this channel and you haven't seen that material, just subscribe here, and so you can check out all of the interviews I do with Black-owned businesses from various locations. Now, moving on. Historical Origins is what we all been waiting for, and this is what we're here for. So basically, if you didn't see the trailer when I launched about a month ago, this is my world history platform where we're just basically going to talk world history. We're going to talk facts. We're going to debunk a couple theories, and we're going to get into a lot of questions that I've been asked over the years, and just maybe detailing a little bit of my background too along the way. So for those who don't know me, my real name is Jason Carter, and I have a huge following, out there for DJ Joker, which is my alter ego or my other persona. DJ Joker is a name that I created back in high school, so I've had that name since I was 16 years old. I did get questions about who is Jacketti Carter, and that name is on the Historical Origins logo when it says a podcast series by Jacketti Carter. Now, that is also me too. It's just an alias name I use. It's a higher thinking name, I would like to say, nickname, nothing that I've taken on seriously, just something that kind of came about when I started really digging in to all of this knowledge and some of the things that I'm going to share with you, and being around my friends and the people who I were around. I was around at the time, always said that I was preaching or I always had something, to share. And so Jacketti Carter kind of just was a name that I came up with whenever I'm kicking knowledge or, giving a lecture or educating people. So it's just a nickname. So nothing serious when you guys see that. Moving on. So again, if you're new to the channel, basically, I just want to give a warning out there to the viewers. I don't mean to offend or disrespect anybody's religion or personal beliefs. When we get to those topics and things like that, I actually have a religious background myself. I have a very religious family and I love them all. And that's not the issue. The issue is educating and us being miseducated for so long, and that being Black people, Black people in America, having this experience here and not really understanding, our full origins, our backstory, our history, our accomplishments, and how did we get to where we are now. There's so many questions, especially going on during this pandemic. People are losing their jobs, people are losing their their minds. This virus is still taking over, and there's just so much going on and so many distractions out there. So I want to hop in and just kind of give my piece, and that is to help educate people. Now, I'm not a certified scholar or anything like that. I don't have any, credentials from any colleges or anything regarding to history. So this is just all of my own studies and my long, hard journey, putting in work, finding things out on my own and just going above and beyond, and really taking a chance and seeing what's out there as far as information, especially when we get to religion. So being raised in a religious family, that kept me limited to, knowing a lot of things and really knowing the backstory, behind the Bible or whatever religion you follow. I'm going to touch on all of them. So again, just bear with me. Have an open mind. Again, this isn't to hurt anybody or offend anybody, but when we get to those points, I will, talk about the real origins and the real backstory to all of these things to basically free the minds of our children and our upcoming, ancestors who will be in power one day. Slavery was one thing, that we got over, but we still are mentally enslaved in a lot of different ways. So I want to really touch on that. And how I'm basically going to do that is just start from the beginning with a lot of basic things. Some of you have, may have heard a lot of this material that I'm going to go over, so it may be a little grade schoolish, middle schoolish, than some high school information, but there's a lot of people out there that just don't know. And have not really connected the dots to a lot of that information regarding, ancient history and just knowing things in the ancient world. So I'm not going to talk anymore. I just wanted to kind of just put a few things out there. I hope you all enjoy. I hope you all learn something. Make sure you like this video if you like it. If you don't like it, leave a thumbs down, and make sure you do comment, and maybe, we can have a Midwest Black episode about some of the things that I said on historical origins. I'm into doing that. And again, if you guys want to be a part of the Midwest Black and you have a black business out there and you want it advertised, again, just email me or DM me on IG or Twitter, and we'll link up and do business and go from there. All right, family, let's get into it. This is Historical Origins Part 1. All right, everybody, welcome back. Here we go. We're going to get right into it. Historical origins. I got slides for you guys, so that way you just won't have to look at me the whole time, and maybe there'll be some information you find useful, so that way you can go back and kind of use it however you want to. So let's dive into it. Basic. Let's just talk the beginning of the universe. Pure darkness. What is there? Energy. Energy is in everything that we do. This whole universe is based off of energy and vibrations. The unseen that is out there, the infinite distance, the infinite darkness, but there is life. There is something going on. We just can't see it with the naked eye, but we do know what atoms are. So when we talk about atoms, we're basically talking about the smallest units of matter. If you don't know what matter is everything. This camera I'm looking into, this microphone I'm speaking through, it's us. Okay, so basically atoms combined with a proton, neutrons, and electrons and a nucleus basically give you atoms, and that creates matter and creates solids, liquids, and gases, and some plasma. So we're going to get into the periodic table next. If you notice here, just on the slides, I wanted to point out carbon, because carbon is very important early on, just because it helps create covalent bonds with electrons in the atoms and things like that. So you have these elements at a very early stage being present and playing, a crucial role. So that's basically how you get to matter, So here I have the 4 fundamental states of matter. Again, solids, liquids, gases, plasmas, various forms. So all of these can be found in the cosmos, in different variations, in different ways, in different types of different things, all made together of atoms and matter. The periodic table is just something, very basic. All of us know about it. All of these elements, carbon, we are carbon-based people. We like to say a lot, and even I think like zinc is in your blood, or somewhere in the body if I'm mistaken, so and many other elements here. So all of these things play a crucial role in the cosmos and in creation itself, and in everything that we do. You have to have, these elements basically creating something. So self-created elements. So when we talk about God, just creating the people and the animals and all of those stages, when we get there, he had to do this work too, because this is scientifically proven, by our means. So we skip over a lot of things when we, just get to the Bible and we talk about creation. It just jumps right in, and it leaves out a lot of science. And that's why religion and science don't really work together. And we're going to keep proving that, and we're going to keep getting into it and what that argument ultimately is. So just moving on. Ions. I know a lot of people out there have heard of ions. There's positive ions, there are negative ions, just kind of like atoms, just the inner working of net charges or net electrical charges, which are basically negative charges. So all of these ions basically are in the cosmos too, and are responsible ultimately for the changes and the shifts that we see, with the planets being able to be contained there and move, or the sun or moon, all of these other fixtures and stars, are helped by ions doing their job. So it's something again that you could, look into. And it's also responsible, for, UV, different radiation, or different levels and different types of radiation. So again, vibration, flow, the energy, magnetic, electromagnetic, you're going to hear all of these words. These are forces that just have to be, positive and negative, that are going to give you changes at different levels of altitude, different miles, different, pressure points, different hot spots, so you're going to get your different lines and levels of radiation or UV rays and things like that. So I got all that here, and you have the ionosphere, and the mesosphere and stratosphere. A lot of you guys have heard some of these terms, so it's just really wrapping our heads around it. And when we get into the ancient world, it basically gives you more understanding at the knowledge that they knew at a very, very earlier time, and kind of debunking later philosophers, European philosophers, coming along and being, credited with being the first discoverers of things, or the founders of things. A lot of that stuff isn't true. So moving on. I talked about color and vibration. Again, this is radiation. When you talk about the color spectrum, everything has color that we can see with our eyes, different shades, starting from blacks and then going into, different colors. They're different degrees, different angles, so different degrees and different spots, aligned in a certain way with the correct vibration will give you the next color. So that's why we have the color wheel, primary, secondary colors, all of these type of things. But this is something, again, that is just in the beginning of creation, and another genius, if you ask me, having color and understanding that, and knowing that how it's produced and how it's created. So another good thing to just look up. So here we go. This big bang thing. A lot of us have heard the Big Bang is basically, the responsible for creating the whole universe. And yeah, that's partially true. You're going to have a huge phenomenon, different energies coming together, creating this Big Bang, what we call. And during the stages after the Big Bang, you have all of these different periods. And I kind of like this graph here because it kind of shows you, just the evolutionary period of the cosmos and what's going on. So from inflation, you have the first stars, then the first galaxies, galaxy evolution, then it talks about dark energy, and so on into the now. So all of these stages, you're talking millions and thousands of years that things are going to develop, so you had to have some type of life or some type of living element, in existence, way before you even had, planets being formed. So we don't know really how old this universe is. They tell us science gives you a pretty good, dates from what they know, but are they really accurate? We can't 100% say, but we know this stuff is thousands, billions of years old. And doing all of these different stages, you're gonna have different things being created, different energies, real stuff, and things coming about that we can't even explain to this day. But this Big Bang here, what I like to call, or kind of narrow it down to, is probably a supernova. And if you guys aren't familiar with supernovas, basically I have it right here for you. This is a powerful, massive stellar explosion occurring in the last evolutionary stages of a massive star. So in the last stages of a massive star, you get this explosion. Or also it says here, or when a white dwarf star, a degenerate star, explodes with nuclear fusion. So these are things that, won't happen one time. This can happen various times in various places of our universe, over thousands and thousands of years. But supernovas are what we're talking about. And during those supernovas, you have what we call gamma ray bursts. And a lot of people have heard of this. And when I think of gamma ray bursts, I always think of Dragon Ball Z and the Kamehameha, bursts of energy, exploding, or other different type of nuclear fusion driven explosions would give you just a huge, light, particles, things flying everywhere. And if you look here, an extreme electromagnetic explosion that is released during a supernova. So out of the supernova, you have the gamma ray burst. And these fragments, these pieces, all of these elements, rocks and minerals, all of these things, basically are exploding into the galaxy. And you have things group that basically are going to form, different types of stellar objects. So those stellar objects are basically what creates the galaxy, and a galaxy, as we know, a gravitationally bound system of stars, stellar remains, interstellar gases, dust, and dark matter. So that's everything that comes from your so-called Big Bang creating our galaxy. And again, this is basic, but I may have younger viewers watching, so just so you guys can kind of understand and keep up, this is how we get the Milky Way created. So this is your Big Bang, or through a gamma ray burst. And they say 13.8 to 14 billion years old. So this is really ancient, so many different levels of transformation going on during these stages before you even get the Milky Way. And then here we have our solar system. We already know the 9 planets that we have in this solar system. Sometimes they say they're finding more, but I don't think there's anything really confirmed, just the 9 that we know of. Then we have our moon, which is Earth's natural satellite, which is something to question because in today's terminology, when we talk about satellites, they're intentionally placed, into outer space. So to monitor, things, monitor something. For the Earth to have a natural satellite, as we call it, it just questions, what does the moon really do, and we are going to get into the conversation later about us going to the moon, but I'm going to differ on that and say we never really made it and it was fake. Yes, you heard it here for the first time if you've never heard this before, but the whole landing on the moon was a fake, and we're going to kind of get into that later, and I can prove it with video evidence from NASA. So we'll touch on that later. So just kind of moving on. Pangea. So a lot of us have heard about Pangea or Pangaea, this big landmass that came to be basically here on the planet Earth after being created. I'm not going to get into those in between stages of before Pangea, but nevertheless, we have Pangea form at some time. And here it's listed at 335 to 340 million years ago. So again, really ancient, far back. You have the super landmass forming around water. So again, you can already, if you're thinking outside of the box, how did it look when it formed, with the Earth being, the question of flat or round? Well, to me, it would obviously mean that it would be flat, just because of the land masses forming, and when you do the geographical math of it being right along the equator and how everything is kind of mapped out precisely, again, something that is God directed, or whatever, it was there for a purpose. So just the geographical location where they put Pangea, it would make you pretty much conclude that the Earth will be flat, but we're going to touch on that a little bit more for those who still think it's round. Nevertheless, you have this, and when we talk about the different layers of the Earth, we know for a fact you have, the crust, the mantle, the core, all of these different parts that we've, gotten to, over the years. So that exists. And in the inner side, you got fire and magma, all of these different things that can appear to the surface, creating volcanoes, tectonic shift in the plates, all of these different things. When you talk about, just below sea level and what's actually going on in there, those elements over periods of the thousands of years, take place. You have volcanoes arising and pretty much causing, continental drift, causing separation, basically, here we go right here, 17 rigid plates, across the Earth, or what the landmass was sitting on, that's going to break apart and spread. And we're looking at about 175 million years ago, that's going to start to break apart and spread. So at this time, 175 million years ago, just to point out, there are living things on Pangea. From the elements, from the cosmos, and everything that lands here, you're going to get life being created. There is a process, but we're talking about old life, ancient life, and we're going to touch on that soon. So when we talk about life, period, I like to map it out as the four domains of life on Earth. And you have basically that mineral domain, you have the plant domain, the animal domain, and then us, the human domain. All of these things kind of piggyback off of one another and pretty much can't live without one another. And that is fact. If you kill all the trees, we won't live. When we get into talk about oxygen, and other things in nature that you could really destroy, that would make it hard for us to live as humans and the animals too. So each domain piggybacks off of each other, and that's real important to know. Again, it's basic, but diving in, it's just things you need to kind of understand. So starting off with the mineral domains, those are all your different types of rocks, amethyst, quartz, crystals, turquoise, lapis lazuli, all of this stuff. You can name. I got a nice little chart here so you can kind of see some of the minerals and stones, but all of these come from the cosmos, and you can find pieces or fragments of these minerals in you. That's why they say we're made up of everything. And again, just scientifically, we don't break down a lot of these natural elements and really express and explain our connection to nature. And that's what religion doesn't do. And that's how it's not natural. Again, we're talking about man-made things, not messages or direct words from God. And again, we're going to get into that for those who are already frowning at me right now. So let's move on. So we talk about the plant domain now. So plant diversity, here I got a chart, is very important because again, everything in nature has a process. So plants are going to also have their own process, from being, just bulbs, leaves, stems, to, flowers that have nuts and berries, to fruiting, trees. That is a process. And that's something that started very early on in stages, but you need these different types of species of plants and things like that, basically to sustain nature or the next level of nature. The plants come from the minerals. The roots of the plant is directly in the ground where the minerals are and where the water is. Everything needs water. So even when we talk about the planet that we're talking about, 70% water, 75%, as well as we are in the human. So water is everything, and water mineral mix gives you plant, diversity in its process. So if you look over here for the, at this second diagram here, you'll see just basic, knowledge that we know about plants and oxygen. So the water from the roots feeds the plants. Basically, the plant gives off, carbon dioxide, turns it into oxygen, releases that. The sunlight, oxygen, produces, sugars, from the plants. And that oxygen too, we pretty much breathe that in. So a natural process that just is 24/7, that is needed for all living things that take oxygen need. So plants have to be first before you get animals. So moving on, all the combinations of the mineral domains and the plant domains, this is how you're going to get your ecosystems. A lot of you know about ecosystems and what they are. We're part of the ecosystem. Some of you don't see us as that, but by nature and by history, that's what we are. We're part of the ecosystem, and everything piggybacks off one another to make it work, for the greater good, or for that living organism to live out its purpose. And again, we don't talk about how important the ecosystems are in religion, so again, therefore, how somebody basically sifted, information of the world of what they wanted to give to you, and it's very clear. So not talking about certain little things in nature, it just doesn't fit when it comes to real life, you have to include nature. So again, ecosystems are very important, and we wonder now, every time we're destroying trees, the Amazon burning and all these other kind of different things, rainforest burning, you offset the natural balance that is God created, because that's something that we didn't do, and we know that it works. You can watch the Discovery Channel all day long and see the animals and what they do. Study nature and you'll learn some amazing things. So moving on, this chart right here basically just kind of breaks down these several million year periods that we're going to go through. And so when you have plant diversity, mineral diversity, ecosystem diversity, millions and millions of years, so many different elements, that can be found in the universe, that's going to go through stages over a period of time. So this little chart right here is just, again, kind of breaking down the animal domain and showing you evolutionary stages. So I encourage you guys to kind of read this close, but it's just grouping and branching together the different type of species that is going to come along before you even get to our common ancestors of species. When we talk about the ape or the hominian or hominid species, and the Australopiths and all that kind of stuff, we're going to get to that shortly. But before we get to this, you talk about, animals from the sea creating, the land animals and various small, lizards and other rodents and things like that becoming the dinosaurs, and the dinosaurs moving on into the mammals, and then the vertebrates changing, and all of these physical changes that's going to happen and occur naturally through nature. So you just have to understand that, and us being a part of nature, we're going to go through those changes too. And I'll talk about that a little later. So these charts right here, again, when we talk about the dinosaurs, it's something that just has to be talked about because we know that they were here. We know that they existed. The bones that they found, or these big, massive creatures. Some people argue about the size of them. Some people say that they didn't exist at all. But I disagree. I think that they did exist. There's just too much evidence that proves it. And this chart right here is basically just showing you evolutionary stages of the sizes. And when you talk about millions of years, you talk about different elements growing. Animals, and changing their habitats, changing their eating types. All of these different things are going to take course at a very early stage, and you're going to get evolution in the dinosaurs. And some people believe, and I believe it too, that the small dinosaurs that eventually started to climb trees, kind of more so lizard-like, these are going to become your ancient old world birds. And you can see that pretty much on this evolutionary chart right here. As years go on, animals or nature finds its new way to survive and its new purpose naturally. So small reptiles growing wings, being closely related, is not far-fetched. So people always talk about dragons or these big fire-breathing creatures, and it's a possibility that they could have existed, just what a dragon is. And we're going to get into that once we really dig more into the ancient world. But you really got to question it. Birds, reptiles are closely related. We talk about scales and feathers, and claws becoming bird claws on the wings and different things like that, and the beaks being similar. All of these animals are definitely in the same family or closely alike. It's argued about, but I believe that there was some type of dragon, some type of animal that over the years would breathe out some type of defense, some type of self-defense, fire, or something like fire or poison that, illuminated like fire and burned, would burn another animal or something like that, and not necessarily what we think of as man-made fire, but an animal that kind of existed like that, that was eventually seen by humans in the ancient world. So again, just showing the bird and reptile relation here. All these pictures are online. You guys can Google them, free to the public. But just got to point that out. There's obviously similarities between the creatures. So you see that when you start to get flying animals, because again, flying animals come after the first land animals. So again, animal evolution. Here, just again, more evolutionary charts, but the one over here, um, with the fish is important because you talk about the tadpole like organisms or other different worms and fungi species that are alive are going to become your old world fish. But as they, take up on their stages of evolution, you have vertebrates changing, jawbone structure changing, the fins and the gills, like all of these things really change. And we know that the gills change and basically become lungs when they become on land, and then these land animals eventually will kind of, develop, basically giving birth on land. So, which will pretty much bring in the mammal species. So we have all of that. This chart here is just basically showing you diversity in genes. Animals have different genes. Again, when they say that we're closely related to them, well, that's how they're tracking it. So the colors, the texture, all of the breakdowns that you can think of a human is going to be the same in animals. So again, through heat changes, light exposure, habitat, diet, especially diet, for survival, and being in different terrains for exploring or migrating, you're going to have changes, and color is definitely going to affect. They say in the rainforest, you can tell poisonous, animals apart from non-poisonous animals because of the color, so it's something that, again, nature consciously did on its own, so you can be aware. Again, let's just move on now. This is important here because we've all heard about the meteor or the asteroid that came along and killed the dinosaurs, which is a fact. They found remnants of it here. They found remnants right here in what we would call the Yucatan Peninsula, the Yucatan Peninsula area, in Central America, Mexico. So this is the Chicxulub or the Chicxulub crater. So this right here, the Chicxulub crater, is what's going to kill the dinosaurs. So we've all heard of the meteor, the asteroid coming in, and this basically is what they talk about. This big meteor basically coming from outer space and hitting in the Yucatan Peninsula area and causing, massive changes in the earth itself. Huge vibration, landslides, mudslides, change in climate, the rise of sea level, just miles of ocean tide coming in and wiping and causing earthquake, causing more shifts of tectonic plates, causing land masses to further, separate, and all of that kind of good stuff. So this is something interesting that you all can, definitely look up and look into. But this is what's going to hit the earth and pretty much wipe out that dinosaur species. And when this happened, there's only so many species that are actually going to survive this, massive destruction. But you're talking wiping out, 90% of the Earth's population, or maybe more, roughly in that area, so this being 60 to 66 million years ago, is going to take place. And by this time you have various different land animals and things like that going, but you're going to have some of the first mammals kind of rise and, be linked back into this time before the crater. And it's very important, to search that history because we are mammals, and part of the mammal family. So to more further understand our lineage and where we come from, you have to trace mammal DNA and go back as far as you can go back. So when we get to this area, you're basically going to find some of the earliest placental mammals, what we call. And this little guy here doesn't really have a name. They just say earliest placental mammals, just meaning small, prototype mammal. And pretty much these creatures are going to be living right before that meteorite hits Earth. And when it hits, there's only so many of them that are going to survive. And they find ways to burrow underground. Again, their diet changes, their habitat changes, but they are mammals, and they are the oldest mammals we can find. So I encourage you guys to look it up. This is what science is connecting us with, is just far as the mammal structure and how mammals actually came to be. But again, DNA and everything is going to change and alter over, thousands of years, once again. So this is something interesting, really go look this up. So earliest, known mammal, it survives that great disaster, and pretty much it's going to have its genes mutated, trying to mate and trying to stay alive. You're going to have different things pretty much going on, and these mammals burrowed underground, and that also affected its hair texture and the skin, different bacterias, different funguses. This is why I got, this chart here is always taking place even right now. We talk about this virus, well, that's, bacteria, transforming due to heat exposure and temperature changes. So you're going to kind of have that always going on in nature. And viruses themselves and fungus, cell separating, doing these different things, creating new life. And a big thing that you got to kind of, look at is, cells, can, reproduce asexually or reproduce by themselves. And there's other animals in nature that can also do that and have been known to do, that type of mating, without another mate, recreating itself from itself. So it's something that always, needs to be talked about just as we move along. And I'm going to kind of come back to that real quick. So after pretty much the rise of this, old placental mammal, or the oldest, mammal, once it starts to move and make its ways up to the trees, probably to go get food, to survive, or probably trying to see the land, where could it go, wherever, these mammals are going to begin to adapt to the trees and basically take on that eating lifestyle, and the trees are going to become plentiful and start, producing more fruit and berries at this time. And so these mammals aren't going to have to really come on the ground anymore. They're going to take way into the trees. And this is where science say you're going to get a lot of your old world monkeys here. Your lemurs and all kind of, they call it the macaque or macaque monkey, or the rhesus monkey. You're going to get all of these old world monkeys basically starting to appear, coming on their evolutionary stages of being mammals too. So it's very important to also look at them and study them. And we often hear about what we call the Rhesus Monkey Genome Project. And I kind of just want to touch on this a little bit, because people get confused when we talk about how closely are we related to monkeys, or do we come from them, all this kind of different stuff. And I'm gonna tell you right here, no, we did not come from monkeys. We are a separate evolved species, but we share, common ancestry, and that's where we always put it as. But this genome project that a lot of you have probably heard about, and why they're studying this particular old world monkey, is because the type of diseases that it can get, and its metabolism and other things going on internally with it, can be closer related to humans than orangutans or chimpanzees. And it differs from orangutans and chimpanzees. So we're all in this little hub, but this monkey they dive more into because it has a connection more with the metabolism area and things like that. And when you go even deeper, this monkey really only has the connection to Europeans and Asian descent people. And we'll kind of touch on that a little bit later. So for those who may not already believe that, but we're going to get to that real soon here. So if you guys ever heard about RNA, DNA, this is kind of what we're talking about. As far as, being altered, these big building blocks of what you are along this process, along animal evolution, before we get to, Homo sapiens, or what we are, amino acids just in your body, building proteins and building different cell structure. This is what's going to be closely related, to some of these, monkeys or other species, and that's fact, but they are not us. So just, kind of proving that point too, even with the brain, when you deal with our brain versus their brain, you see all the differences in the evolutions that, old world mammals have had, then through the, the monkey chimpanzee era up until what we are now. You see the different, parts of the brain growing bigger, growing smaller, just basically showing the evolution of consciousness, and in my opinion, we are the highest form of consciousness, but we're still animals in very So connected. Um, Here are a lot of skulls. We're going to get into the old world, monkeys and chimps real soon here. But these are just skulls and showing you millions of years of these different creatures basically taking different forms in skull structure, the brain getting bigger, in size, showing you again, advancement, these old world animals using tools and things of that nature. So you're going to have all of this stuff kind of going on, but again, it's a process. You have to give evolution its time to really understand it. So this chart or these charts here just kind of shows you a breakdown roughly over the millions of years that we kind of had all of these stages. And this is another up close kind of looking at different parts of the skull, and you can see the relativeness between these chimpanzees, who they say we're the closest connected to, and just the different parts. But of course, our brain is bigger, our skull is bigger. There is obvious differences, but you see that with this common ancestor tying in, just that path of evolution. So again, looking here at the other photo, you see the shape and differences of the hand. It's the same with the feet. We're going to go, basically growing that big toe or growing the big thumb, and this becoming useful when it was non-useful. But that's again the change of an animal changing its environment, or climbing or staying on the ground. All of these various things are going to take place over thousands of years, and that is naturally going to develop the use of thumbs and position the toes differently. So this happened in animals too. This right here, family portrait, it says, again, just kind of a rough picture showing you that timeline of evolution. And right here where you see the red arrow, this is where we're supposed to have the split in DNA, and that common ancestor of what we are is supposed to be here. So it's hard to pinpoint what this actually is. Nobody in science can ever tell you what it is. We don't have any pictures of it, so we don't really know. So it's kind of hard to say what it is, but it's very important to understand that there is a split. We are not apes. We did not come from the Australopiths or the other 6 stages of man that I'm going to get into very shortly. There is a split from DNA, and we are something completely different, what we are. And it's easy to kind of see that, because you could ask yourself, well, why didn't, monkeys keep evolving into people? If you believe that, or for those who do believe that nonsense, you just don't see it. So it doesn't make sense there. Something had to change, but we know monkeys keep producing monkeys. Humans can keep producing humans. So my biggest thing to know is whatever this ancestor was, is whatever the first of it was, or how many of it was, it had to be female. Again, for those of you who disagree, man is a mutation of woman. We come from the woman. I don't know any man who did not come from a woman. That is the only way you can be put here. It is the only way you can really be reborn again. You have to go through the womb of a woman. So knowing that this is our life process, whatever was here first, it had to be female. And it also gives you that question, was this female species able to produce, asexually or on its own without a male? I would have to say yes, because it just had to be, so many of them before you even got to the male, the numbers. So you could have that balance just to sustain life itself. So you had to have multiple women being able to carry, multiple children, and then being able to take care of that child, or learning that. So another question you could ask is, well, who taught the first women who were having children, or to take care of those other women? So this again is a mystery in this area, because you're talking about some high elevated consciousness. And we know that when we're born, we are nursed by our mother. That is your original God, not some man, not some book. It is your mother. Your woman is your lifeline. or your mother, excuse me, is your lifeline. That is your savior. That is how you survive. That is who you're looking for. That is all in self-consciousness, which is crazy. A baby comes out, it knows to reach for its mother to feed. An animal comes out, whether it's a puppy, chicken, whatever, it goes for its mother. So this is something that is a natural occurrence in nature and in the human world. So it just really, makes you ask the question, what was it? How was it creating? How many of it was it? And the natural way that the woman looks now, you couldn't have looked like that in your original form, just because of the process. And when we talk about ancientness, there was to move on from there. We'll touch on, other little pieces back to this, but those are just kind of my thoughts roughly. So I briefly said the 6 different stages of man, which we had. Some of you may know this, some of you may not. And basically, they say man because it's man-like, the closest to it. So you can clearly see the path of evolution of these species basically led to us because they are man-like. Or mankind, which I can't wait to touch on that word later and why I think they even use the word mankind and man. Anyway, so you have the Archaeopiths, the Australopiths, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, the Neanderthal species, Homo heidelbergensis, and Homo sapiens. All of these different Homo species and ape species are going to exist, all found in Africa. And basically what you're going to have is 3 of these last stages, which is Homo erectus / Neanderthal, Homo heidelbergensis, and Homo sapien, pretty much leave the continent of Africa. And these species are basically going to develop into other creatures and other, subspecies of ape in these different areas, but they can be found outside of the continent of Africa because at those last 3 stages, basically they got smart enough, tool working was something that was already there, and using other small objects to hunt and group hunt. So these beings in the last couple stages were actually gaining better intelligence. Speaking was changing because of just the need and the want to verbally express feeling. So these creatures definitely had a lot of time to change and to alter. And again, when you continually do something as a practice, and every time a female has a baby and that activity is going on outside of the baby within the community and everything like that, and the mother is living, some of you basically stores that consciousness or piece of that thinking thought into the offspring. So that's kind of how you're already known to come out with some of these behaviors. It's a passing on of the code. You're coded for actions and how to do certain things. So all of that is going to be affected by geography and so many different, other things. So you have that going on, and you're going to have these last 3 stages pretty much go outside of the continent and pretty much move and populate other areas. So at 300,000 years, you're going to have some of the oldest fossils in Africa of the Homo sapien gene. So us, dating back as humans or looking like this, 300,000 years, could be, or older. So those numbers are definitely tossed around and played with a lot, but it's something to question. So just kind of moving on, this is Australopiths or Australopithecus, kind of one of those hard words to say. We've all heard about the Lucy bones, or we heard about Lucy. Who is this character? Lucy is an ape, couple stages before Homo sapien, who's closely related, just as far, again, what they did. These species also had rituals to bury their dead. So becoming more elevated, more consciousness, and the walking and the structure is going to be simple and similar to human structure. These the hip plates and all of that, but of course we're much taller. But you can kind of see the closeness and the connection to short-statured humans, some of the oldest and original humans that we're going to get into in a little bit, out of Africa. They like to kind of make that comparison, but again, we are separate, but you just see consciousness moving and taking place. So the Lucy find, somewhat 3.5 million years ago, around the Ethiopia region, is a big find, just because it kind of gives you a different think on what these species were doing and actually how smart they were. So we've all heard of the Denisovans. This is a term that gets thrown out there a lot. The Denisovans. And basically, the Denisovans are just another subspecies of humans found in, Russia, northern China area, and this is pretty much going to produce your Neanderthal gene, and or your Neanderthal race rather. So, Europeans say that they are the descendants of the Neanderthals, and we get all different kind of photos and pictures, and they kind of say they look like this. But maybe at some point later on, your ancient cave people, hunting and gathering Europeans, very well could have looked like this. But again, they are a mutation of us, and that's the first time I've said that. So Europeans who are listening, or anybody who doesn't agree with that, I'm going to explain how they are a mutation of us, and how that lineage, the Neanderthal Denisovan lineage, why it can only be pretty much linked to them, as far as where they come from in their ancestry. Real quick, just to point out, this is a 160,000 year old recreation of a man they named Adaltu, and basically this is a reconstruction. And here you see the picture of what this black African man could have looked like 160,000 years ago, based off of this skull found again in Africa. So they named him Adaltu. So again, Adaltu, Adam, all of these A words linking to the first man or oldest man, and we're going to touch on that a little bit more. But this is what we could have looked like 160,000 years ago, and I'm not even say what we could have looked like. This is what we look like all the way back then. So the reconstruction here is a pretty good one. So that's just something to take note to. So now, as we talk more about the human domain, you guys just got to kind of understand what's going on. And a lot of you know this, especially my females out there, my sisters. You guys know how life is created, mitosis, meiosis, transfer of chromosomes from the male and the female, the egg and the fertilization, and then everything like that. So for those who you don't know, this is just a nice little chart here, just kind of showing the process in which we go through now, male and female creation. But many theories out there that women, were creating, without men for a very long time. And I do agree with that. I do believe that, as I just explained previously, touching on a little bit, but this is something good to know. And just carrying on, these are processes and the breakdowns of, again, asexual reproduction, or parthenogenesis, whichever term you want to use, but just organisms being able to create that before humans. And again, science agreeing that humans were able to do the same thing, being the female. And we know that the Y chromosome that we give off is the mutation. And so that is kind of proof there that eventually along the way something happened, to this female. Again, being in a different environment, things being altered, weather, temperature, all that takes effect again. You're going to have changes. So you're going to have changes in reproduction on itself, and a need, for a male to be created to sustain just the living race, or what we are. So that's kind of my opinion. Just through science, and you can go on and on about this stuff and really dig into it. There's a lot of good information with it. But during that also too, this is just a chart kind of showing you melanin and the melanin structure, and how that has also been changed and altered. It's been altered in animals, it's been altered in us. Some things have, more melanin, some things have less, but it is also went under mutation and change. Anytime you're dealing with, diseases or genetic diseases, something like vitiligo or other skin disorders, for black people, it's some type of melanin deficiency. So this being altered is something that's going to happen too in the ancient world, producing all kind of effects. And this is what brings me to this. So again, not to offend anybody who has albinism or OCA 1 through 7 or vitiligo. I just want to make a point that, these are, skin deficiencies that happen in the womb, different processes of creation that can occur, because kids are born, with these, deficiencies or whatever. And if you look at the middle charts, these are people from the Middle East. Yeah. White colored skin people, with different OCA 1 through 7 effects, but from the Middle East. And if you look right here, the light-skinned brother between the two African kids, they're all Africans, the African tribe, but there have been albinos, OCA 1 through 7 in African tribes for not millions of years, but thousands of years, so this is something that isn't new, and they've raised them, they took them in, they don't find anything wrong with them, they actually appreciate them, because of the differences, and, they're very much included, they're protected people, historically they were. I don't know how things are now, but it's something that has always gone on. These are changes that occur in the womb. So just bear with me, family, as I explain this. So my thinking or my opinion is that when the Homo sapiens, or what we are, the Africans, got to different regions. When you get to different regions of, by migration, again, the weather, the changes, the climate, and your eating habits is going to affect everything that you do. And I think that this was occurring, and as Africans migrated into Europe, they can only go so far up until a present point because of ice walls, or pretty much the northern hemisphere still being frozen. So they can only go so far, and being isolated, being changed by the weather, by, nature itself, by cold temperature, by diet, eventually produced a mutation of genes in the womb of the African woman. And at some point, that African woman started to produce, different types of skin deficiencies, through the melanin being altered out of Africa. So it's not as hot. You're going to get different reactions, but you're still going to keep your melanin. But it's going to change. So this is where I think OCA 1 through 7 is going to pretty much have its start. Scientifically, there's no number that they've put out there that said, hey, this is this old. There's no way you can pinpoint and say how old these diseases are, but they are found in the ancient world. So this is something that we know that has been going on for a very long time. Now, anytime you have people with different skin deficiencies or whatever it may be, or ones who don't, you pass on your DNA, creating an image of you in the Bible, create man and woman in our image. Well, that's passing off your seed. The only way you can create an image of yourself is by reproduction. So in reproducing, OCA 1 through 7, in different people, you're going to carry that gene out and create lighter skinned people. And also, just again, the climate changes, the phenotypes are going to change, for survival and all that kind of stuff. And you're going to lose your melanin, over a period of time because you don't need it anymore. Earlier, when we talked about the rhesus monkey kind of being connected to Europeans and Asians, well, basically my theory on that is that old world monkey was living at the same time as this Neanderthal species and Denisovan species was living, and may have mated with it at some point in time and carried out that DNA. And when we Homo sapiens got to Europe, this Denisovan Neanderthal species was still living and still there in the caves, but not fully human-like. And we were already in the final stages of being humans. And what you're going to have is some of us, through exploration or curiosity or whatever, eventually mated. And that is going to create your white race. And I think, honestly, the mating of Homo sapiens and the Denisovan Neanderthal mix is where you're going to get the genes to actually produce OCA1 through 7 in vitiligo. These skin deficiencies are going to become from that mating of those species and ultimately produce Europeans. So this is my theory on it. That's why when you get to Greek times, they even themselves say, Europeans were coming out of the caves still, and living barbaric like for a very long time. And that's behavior of Denisovan, Europeans. So these people are gonna basically carry out that gene, these skin deficiency genes, and give you albino, and these people are gonna eventually just become pure cut white people again over time. So that's my theory on it. They're just a mutation of us, but that's kind of the best that I can do as a step-by-step process. You don't have to agree with it, but no matter how you cut it, and when you start digging, you should be somewhere around the area that I'm in. So moving on, this is important to point out too, because again, we talked a little bit about hemispheres, but as you see, the equator and the latitude, longitude lines, tropical Cancer, you see the different sections of the earth is kind of, what we look at it now on the land masses and everything like that. So you kind of see all of that going on, and notice Africa is the only continent in all the hemispheres, which is important. And it's another key to basically let you know that life started there. You have all the elements you need. It's perfectly in all the hemispheres, unlike any other continent. And then when you look at the equator, it goes directly through where we say as historians, the cradle of civilization basically occurred right around, Sudan, Ethiopia, Uganda, Kenya area, Somalia, Tanzania. That whole area over there in Eastern Africa is what we refer to as the cradle of civilization, where our final stages of humans, come from, and where we can connect the oldest humans to. And we're going to elaborate on that a little bit more, but nevertheless, it lines up perfectly with the equator. Basically just pointing out, to back that up, we have 3 rules, 3 laws of all living things. So if you haven't heard of these, I suggest you look it up. You have Glauber's rule, you have Bergman's rule, and you have Allen's rule. So these 3 rules are basically just stating, the different breakdowns in species, where cold-blooded or warm-blooded species are going to tend to be founded, species with longer limbs or shorter limbs, where they're going to be founded, species that are more heavily pigmented or less pigmented, or they're going to be founded. So these 3 rules just basically sticks to law of animals or law of nature. So you can kind of read through this, while I have the slide up on the screen, just kind of get an idea, that this doesn't change. It's just something that kind of has to be. And this is where what science says and how science lays out animal mappings and where they tend to hang. All right, moving on. This right here is just a sideways picture of the earth. A lot of us look at the earth again like that. We talked a little bit about flat and round. I'm going to touch on it a little bit more. But just showing you the precise, degrees and areas of the earth in a 3D model or a sphere model that we're used to looking at. And basically kind of still, breaking it down in different hemispheres. And again, Africa, meets all the qualifications of everything, so that's why this continent was chosen. That's why it's important, and is the center, essentially of the world. So very important. So round or flat, I'd use these models because again, they're popular models that we're used to seeing or already have seen. So there's a lot of theory that this first one here, the earth being flat, that it's flat, but it's covered by this dome that we can't escape. And even in the Bible, they mention something called the firmament. Well, this is kind of what they're talking about. And we're going to get into that a little bit more. And I'm going to actually let you know where they stole that from and where they got that from. And they had it all backwards. And so it really never should have been a thing. It came from them looking at something and interpreting it wrong. And they went and put it in the Bible and thought that that could explain, kind of our position on earth, that it's flat, but we're trapped in this dome of either, bad chemicals or carbon, dioxide or whatever you want. And we can't escape it unless you break through this glass ceiling. I don't typically believe that, because then it questions, is the sun inside this thing? How could the sun be inside this dome? Is it outside of the dome? If it's outside of the dome, is it that strong, to penetrate it through it when we can feel the sun, up close and personal on our skin? So it just doesn't really fit. So just kind of bust that up there. The second picture is the, UN logo, and as well as the third one, and where they kind of map it out, with the land being flat and just in various parts of, the globe here, and saying that it's pretty much like a flat plane, because if you're on a plane, again, you never curve when you're sitting, which would basically, debunk the theory of the earth being round, or when you look at sea level, or out at sea level, you never curve or go off it, or, even thinking about a lighthouse when the light pans over, they're always flat, they're never on a curve, post or anything. So it's just something to kind of look at, basic knowledge. Key to this is kind of Antarctica, of getting to Antarctica, and the sailors and explorers, getting to Antarctica, they never curved off the land. They never, went in any weird angle, to get to it, just going south and getting to the tectonic plate zone, you can find Antarctica. But yet when we get it on the globe, we picture it, at the bottom of it, which just doesn't make any sense. If it were a sphere, you'd probably fall right off trying to go to it. And kind of backing that up, with Antarctica, there's also another continent that they recently found near it. So even going to this continent again, going to that, southern hemisphere region, you'd be ready to fall off the earth if it was flat. So or if it was round, excuse me. So I just don't think that it's round, it has to be flat. So this continent here, Zealandia, kind of off the coast of Australia, right above Antarctica, but you can see it, underwater. When they found it, it probably broke off of Australia or somewhere else, a long time ago, and just sank. There's other areas that are proven, sinking continents, sinking land masses and all that. So it's not outlandish. But this is also kind of another, reason to kind of bust up the whole round earth thing. And hollow earth, we talk about hollow earth, and that's just kind of the idea of you actually being able to go inside the earth, and there's people living in there. There's all other kind of things, Now I'm not saying this, this is just the theories amongst theories that we hear. But what's kind of interesting is this, gentleman right here, Admiral Byrd. If you've never heard of Admiral Byrd, I suggest you look him up. He was a navigation pilot, kind of around the time of World War II, I believe. 1888 to 1957. So he was definitely around there at that time, and he was aiding, the U.S. and Germany at this time, basically about the findings of Antarctica. He kind of documents in this book here that I posted for you all, and what was going on, and he's kind of credited for mapping that out and getting to the landmass, but he never states about pretty much falling off the globe or going in a circle. So there again, to me, he is all the proof that you need that we are on a flat earth. And one of the more interesting things that Byrd was saying was that there was traces of a lost civilization or a hidden civilization or a different type or mutated civilization here, on this continent. So that's something, again, you're going to have to get into the book to kind of read about. A different bred race. This is the area also where a lot of people who believe in aliens say where you can find the tall whites or the grays. That's alien terms. So if you know anything about that, this is where they believe these creatures come from, and they've been hiding out there in Antarctica for a very long time, and they can't live outside of the earth or on the surface of the earth. So again, it's basically created a human shell to live through. This is where you get your whole, alien race, your reptilian race. All these different things are kind of point back to these areas when you start researching this stuff, or whichever way you kind of want to go with it. I don't really deal with aliens too much, so I'm not going to touch on that. I'll kind of just leave that for you all, but definitely look up Admiral Byrd and some of the things he was saying. And not only did, the finds of that race and possibly living down there, He also had a lot of resources and gold and iron ore and all these things there. And right after that, his exploration, pretty much the UN got together and they pretty much made Antarctica a sacred landmark. You know, you can't go to certain places there, and they pretty much just tied a lot of these areas out off these digging sites in these places. And you know, we can't just go walking over there, so there's something there. There's something that they're hiding. And not to mention that he also said that there's another continent um on the other side of Australia. I mean, not Australia, but Antarctica. Now, back then, he might have been talking about Zealandia or the remnants of Zealandia that they found, which is now sunken now, or he could have been talking about something else. But nevertheless, this book is interesting. Um, so I asked, is Earth a decadahedron? And some of you heard of decadahedron. Some of you may have not heard of decadahedron. But basically, this kind of has to do with platonic solids. And it's kind of like a 3D figure with 12 sides. But these sides kind of taking different forms and holding different shapes. And we could be on one of those sides of the solid. And pretty much all of the land that we're on is just contained on a flat surface of, you know, a piece of the earth. And there's a lot more to it, and it has a lot more different shape, and it's not a perfect circle or sphere, but you can line up all the different shapes of platonic solids and lay it over the earth, and you can kind of get all these different structures. And it could be, you know, so there could be multiple flat surfaces, and we're just only on this particular side of it. So again, another question, something to look into. Go look up decadahedron. There's a lot of videos on that kind of stuff and crazy information, but hey, maybe. So this is kind of the turning point where we're going to dive straight into Africa, and we're going to, you know, pretty much lead into part 2 of historical origins. I've learned enough to kind of, you know, put some things out there to people, and there's so much more that I didn't get from one of these books, you know, that we're going to get into. So it's cross information, but I recommend these to anybody getting started. Is just in African history or world history studies. You know, check these out. So you have Sheikh Anta Diop, or Diop as we all call, one of the grand masters, one of the grand fathers of teaching, you know, African history. This book really dives into evolution. He kind of talks about the origins of civilization. It kind of takes you on a further detailed journey of those 6 different stages of man that I kind of spoke about. So I'll recommend that book if you were confused about what I said, because I went through it quickly. Get into this book and really read it. You'll learn some things from it. And then Dr. Ben, another great grandmaster teacher, who we all owe a lot to as far as starting our journeys. And this book here, Mother of Western Civilization, is a great one because it just shows you how everything was, you know, carbon copied from Africa, you know, from religion and other practices, and how they came in and doing all of these different things, how they stole it, you know, later on in the book. But it also gives you some origins of some African history there. Real good book by the late Grand Master. So rest his soul, and Brother Diop too. And then you also have this book here, Temples of the African Gods. It's a really, really good book, and I recommend it. Just kind of gives you a lot of origins in South Africa, some of the oldest people here, and we get into symbolism and some of the oldest, you know, pictographs in the world and things like that. And we're going to touch on that soon. So that's a good one to get, by Johann Heine and Michael Tellinger. Then you have this book here by Chancellor Williams. The Destruction of Black Civilization is a good one, kind of showing you our downfall and how we fell to European powers in various ways, and what was going on in the ancient world, the mix-up of religion and wars and everything tied in, and the deception of certain people leading us, you know, to where we are today. So I recommend all these books. You know, they're good to have, and go get them, go read them. Next here is just showing you 3 very important mountains when we talk about the origins of life and humanity itself. And again, when we say the cradle of civilization, it's going to occur in these mountain rift valleys here. So Mount Kilimanjaro, which is in Tanzania, Mount Rwenzori in Uganda, and Mount Choka in Ethiopia. At the foothills of these mountain ranges, you know, you're going to have all the elements you need to create life and some. the water, the minerals, the heating, climate changes, the dust, whatever you can, think of is all going to be here. And these mountain ranges are basically where we're saying, the oldest African tribes that we can connect to come from, our oldest ancestors. And DNA kind of backs up that too. Real quick, this right here is just showing you pictures of the Nile, pretty much going through these mountain ranges. This mountain up here has snow on the caps. Does snow in Africa, but it's not like snow like here. So they do have different weathers, but the climates are different, so it doesn't really snow too much anymore, I don't think, but it still can happen due to the right changes. People are messing with the weather so much nowadays that you might not see snow in Africa anymore, but nevertheless, it was there. Now, this brings me to what I was talking about and mentioning, some of the oldest ancestors, some of the oldest people that still can be found in Central Africa, East Africa today, in the heart of it, in the thick of it all. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Twa, or known as, pygmies in derogatory terms and other things. These are the oldest, ancestors that we can relate to as Africans, the oldest named tribes, I would like to say. So people actually giving themselves a name, a culture, a style, a way of doing things that we have on record and that we can take forward is the Twa. So the Twa, easily 220,000 years ago, these are the ancestor to all of your Bantu tribes that are going to spring out of Africa. So definitely go study the Twa, the Great Lakes Twa. These people here, short-statured people, are some of your oldest ancient people in the world, and they are going to bring civilization and so many things to the world before you even have a European. There's no Spaniard at this time. There's no, Chinese at this time. There's no nothing at this time. So nobody exists 220,000 years ago on the planet but Africans. I don't care where he was. At this point, we're specifically talking about Africa, because we can kind of trace the migration route from this area of the Great Lakes region and then out. So from this area, they're going to go to the south. Everything always goes to the south. And when we talk about the south, you have to talk about the Khoisan, or the San people, the Khoikhoi, various names. But this, again, is another ancient tribe descending from those Africans out of the cradle of the civilization. They're going to go south. And the reason they're going to go south first is because of the Nile River. And if you guys don't know the geography of the Nile River, it actually flows reverse. So at Egypt, or at top of Africa, how we would look, that is kind of the southern part, and the southern part of Africa and South Africa is the northern part, and that is the way in which the Nile flows. So it flows, up south, down north, as we would like to say. And that's something that you kind of gotta say a few times to kind of get it in your head, the flow of it. So those ancient Africans out of the cradle are going to travel to the source of the Nile. Where does it come from? You follow the animals, and you study nature. It's easily, or it can be easier to basically, find a path, migrate a path for you, so that what was going on. And that's what we did. That's what we were doing. We would follow the Nile and go to the source, and you're going to have these Africans, the San tribe, basically start to set up shop and push forward the envelope as far as advancing technology, building strong structures, building tools, starting to study the stars and things of that nature. So go study the San people. Again, these are some of your oldest ancestors. And some of these pictures, again, are more modern. The cameras aren't into the 1830s, the early 1840s. And so these pictures were taken, then, but just to show you, this is just a history of what we were doing. And the San and the Twa people were starting fires, and, melting different minerals and gold and iron and steel and doing things like that, and really figuring that out at an old, not an old, but at an ancient time and ancient date, because they had so much time to do it, and the elements were there, pulling gold and finding those gold mines, in Southern Africa and in various parts of, the continent, and what to do with it. And they found many resources for gold and the elements of it and what they could use, from it. So this map here, just pointing out when I mentioned about the Nile, flowing the other way, just kind of basically gives you an idea of how it would look if we were looking from that perspective, coming out of Central Africa there, and then following the source of the Nile, which would be South Africa. Now, I would say probably at a South African point, you could have probably seen, South America, the continent over there, and then over here, Australia and the islands that were over there. So you probably could have seen that with the naked eye, just standing at the tip of Southern Africa. And it's something they probably noticed a long time ago, that there was more land out there, and wanted to travel and started to have an interest in travel. So if we flip the map back around, you'll see trade routes. Now this map comes later on, around the 1500s or 1400s, it says on there actually. So these trade routes were already known to the world then at that time in 1400. So that shows you that this doesn't happen overnight. So 1400, that's pre-Columbus, and these routes are already in existence. So that just goes to show you that African was the first to, circumnavigate the whole globe and go into all of the different regions in all of the different hemispheres, and figure that out at some point in time. So by creating a boat and things like that, this is something that we were doing for a very long time, and you can't really pinpoint how long ago we landed on some of these areas. This is just pointing out, when I said we all come from the Bantu regions or the Congo regions, just the African DNA and ancestry, how far back we can go. 71%. If you ever heard of Niger Codofanian, that is basically the makeup that they classify African ancestry in, and every African walking around is at least 71% Niger Codofanian, and that DNA, that lineage, that links come from Central Africa, around the Congo region, the Bantu regions, and what I'm talking about. So go look that up. And they're saying that only 13% of us, could be European, 8% other African still. So people walking around, black people walking around talking about they ain't African and they have no ties, you need to wake up and look in the mirror. You are an African first before anything. This is where you come from. This is why you look the way you do. Your hair, your features, your body, female sisters, your lips, all of that, your beautiful, beautiful features. You come from Africa, light skin or dark skin. Area over there, the Kerma, the Champa, 80,000 years ago. This is just that line basically leading, into Eastern Africa, around into India, and Southern Asia, in the South Pacific, Japan, all of those areas right there. That migration route, or where you're going to find the Negritos, all of there. These are the original people of those lands. These are the inhabitants, or the oldest inhabitants, and you can still find some of these people very, very dark skinned, pushed all the way back into, a lot of the forest areas, or areas that people don't want to live once colonization started to come in. So you still can find traces of some of these dark skinned, tribes that are clearly, African connected in these areas. So if you look at the pictures, you see, how the features, would start to change, later on. So even if these were taken in 1840, you see what they look like in 1840. So imagine what they could have looked like, in 1240, hundreds of years before that. Very, very still dark-skinned people, so come on, so the people over there, the Japan and all of those, the Chinese, all of those dynasties, the original dynasties, were founded by African people, and it's not, something for me to just say or joke about, but think about it. Y'all know the Buddha hair is not it. African features, full lips, they know that. All the original, dynasties or whatever in Asia had black people in them. There's a saying that, you can't be a real ninja without, or a samurai without having African blood, and this is something they said. So, they have African roots too. We founded those areas. So it's just something to keep note of. Don't forget that. Now we talk about Melanesia, the Semang, the Batek, the Ati, these tribes, descendants of the Anu, and all of these people moving still further into Japan on the way to Australia, coming, from that trade route line that we talked about. You're going to run into these people. Look at these afros. Again, if this is 1840, 1845, And I'm saying that because the camera, invented in the late 1830s. So this is why I'm saying that. But look at these people, African ancestry. So clearly, you have them in denial to this day and say that no, we don't have any African history. And you look at what's going on all over the globe. Eventually these people, would be taken advantage of too, wiped out, interbred, all those kind of things, and you lose the features. But this is Australia. We often talk about, the Aborigines and the African presence in Australia, coming from, the Andaman Islands and all of that, or other routes, leading you straight from Southern Africa into Australia. 80,000, 100,000 years ago, these islands are populated. People go look it up. African ancestry, so you see the migration, you see the move. And at 80, 100,000 years ago, there are no white people. Now, this brother here with the white beard, this is later, and I believe the 1960s. And this brother here still looks African. He looked like one of my uncles. And this is the 1960s out of Australia, still very dark skinned. So come on, y'all. Just get with the program and understand that Africa, or not Africa, but Africans put a foot on every part of the globe first. These are reconstructions of the Grimaldi in Europe. Y'all have heard of them before. Old Africans that made it up to Europe. Again, the ones that got isolated, losing pigment, genes changing in the womb, creating different races, or not different races, but the strand of what would create different races, and all those kind of things. So these are, reconstructions of what they possibly could have looked about like. They're not very good, but again, the science is still ultimately proven that we were in Europe. So something to just take note of. Again, here, family, look at this brother named Ratu. He looked like Rick Ross right here in the middle. This brother rose to power in Fiji in 1852. So this picture was taken in 1852. Look at this brother. Look at him. He looked like one of y'all uncles at the barbecue. He just got on some stylish clothes. So all of these, these are warriors. This is what the warrior classes were still looking like, ready to cut off some heads, before they got wiped out. But obviously, Africans, this brother at the top right here with the fro and the ring around his neck, he looked like one of the Jacksons, so come on now. So it's very clear that the islands of Fiji leading into, Hawaii and all over there, and the Isles of Samoans are black people, so all the islands in this planet, in this world, are populated by black people, and we were there first. All the islands belong to us historically. So why it's hard when Dominicans, these today, well, they're washed out a little bit, but the ones that, are very dark skinned and say they ain't black, like, come on now. You guys don't practice to be black because you understand racism, and you understand that you were colonized too and mixed with, Spanish, so maybe you can get, a couple handouts from white daddy or the government. So I get it, and a lot of people play the fences on that, putting European on their IDs and other paperwork, just that in denial of their black roots. So we see so much of that going on in the world. Come on, family. This brother right here, Kamehameha the First, founder and the first ruler of the Kingdom of Hawaii, 1782. And this is a drawing, obviously, not a real image, but 1782. They did a drawing and they showed you what this brother looked like. Again, some of y'all uncle that'll be at the family reunion drinking a Miller Lite and some baseball socks. So again, this brother, clearly African. Samoan Islands, island of Fiji, we were all there. We knew how to explore. We knew how to build boats and get to these places. So it's just apparent, people. And then this is just showing Africa, the main source of all of these products: iron ore, petroleum, natural gas, crude oil, gold, coffee, tea, oil, copper, diamonds, all of these different natural resources. A lot of you have seen this picture on my Instagram or other people's Instagram, but all over the place, natural resources. And this is something we discovered. We discovered it, and we start working it, we start mining it and figuring out what this stuff does. And then we begin to trade it, we begin to export it, and use it in different areas on journeys and things like that. Navigating the globe before, a real compass. We are the original compass. So y'all just got to understand that. Again, before Europeans, before Asians, there were Africans doing their things. Now, this is really important to understand because when I talked about earlier, just, Africans being isolated and could only go, so far in Europe and got stuck. Well, you can see right there at 15,000 to 25,000 years ago, most of that was all ice. And you see the parts on the chart, if you study it quickly, that were dried out or where people could have survived or people could have been, as late as, 15,000 years ago. Okay, so we had been here, been living, but this is that last natural disaster that they like to talk about, or that great flood, that last great flood. This is the flood that the Bible speaks about, roughly, the 12,000 years ago, all these different times. But science, notes it as the last glacial maximum, or the LGM. So again, something to look up and look important. This is that great flood that we speak about, real, not really what they tell you that the flood meant. So I'm going to cover that and just bust that all up shortly here. But, again, it's just important to notice the areas that we could travel while that were not, part ice. And Africa is all open. Australia is open, South America and even North America, which we got to North America, around the same time, just traveling as this was happening, trying to evade and trying to flee and go and take chances on different lands that we saw on failed journeys and trying to get to, but finally take that chance once you had, this taking place and people trying to branch out more. And you're going to get, Africans to start to populate America around this same time. Go look it up. Now, Adam's calendar, South Africa. And we're almost done with part one. Just for those who are watching, I'm going to stop shortly and we'll get into part two. Adam's calendar, South Africa, something else that you guys should also go look up. This is basically an old system designed by Africans, those South Africans of the San tribe that I told you about down in this area, basically already getting a concept of the equinoxes and the winter solstices and, the changes in the weather. Obviously, you go through 1 year of life, you're going to see the changes in the weather and the season. So it's not rocket science. So they would map it out, on the Earth cycle in a different scale, and the solar calendar and the lunar calendar and all these other things that they were doing this diagram to. And this comes from that African, gods and temples that I showed you earlier. So again, already doing this in South Africa, maybe 30,000 years ago. So this is before this great flood, that we talked about, or the last LGM. And here, what they want to say is an early carving of Heru. Those of you who study Kemetic theology, you know what I'm talking about, and I can't wait to get there because that's kind of my area, and that's a lot of things that I hold on to the most. What the Africans were doing in ancient Kemet, as we like to say, not ancient Egypt. Egypt is a Greek word, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit later. But the Africans in ancient Kemet, I feel the closest connected to, just because they have the greatest knowledge and most accurate knowledge over the old world as far as what they were actually trying to say. When you use Egyptology or European history or rely on European scholars, they're going to lie to you and they're going to botch a lot of what they are trying to say. But nevertheless, this is an ancient carving of Heru, which is the falcon. The mighty falcon, the son of the sun, and we're going to dig into that a little bit more. I don't want to confuse anybody, but this is where they're kind of saying it started, just the origin of them, deifying the falcon, of the great bird, and it meaning something. So as we move on in the same book, we talk about crop circles, and they talk about Stonehenge, which Africans built. They like to say aliens built that, but no, it was Africans that made it to Europe and were basically doing the same things that were already done in South Africa. So family, again, the knowledge that was known in the South eventually made it back to Central Africa, and then it would leave that area into the East and on into Europe. So the knowledge can be passed on within years, within one lifetime. One man can give so much knowledge to the world. So you talk about thousands and thousands of people. So this is from this in Southern Africa is how you're going to eventually get your crop circles and Stonehenge and things like that in Easter Island and all these other monuments. But it starts in South Africa first, way before even the Giza Plateau. So this book does a great job of showing that, and basically kind of, saying that the Africans were, trying to construct energy, and pull energy from ions or the ionosphere, because they knew that it was different layers, again, by studying the cosmos and what that could do, on a, what that could do on Earth and for the people. So they were into a lot of different things, so this book just kind of dives into that, but this shows you just ancient ruins of crop circles, and then going in there and showing you, again, when we talked about platonic solids and basically, having different sided diagrams down here, kind of representing what would be in the heavens. So this is deep, so science was known ancient to the Africans. So we are the founders of science, not some of the European philosophers that we're going to cover later. Again, this is another picture from the same book, just showing you that when we came to the pyramids built later, Adam's calendar, and there also are pyramids in Great Zimbabwe too, if you guys didn't know that. The pyramids, Adam's calendar, the pyramids in Great Zimbabwe are perfectly aligned with the pyramids on the Giza Plateau, which comes much later. So again, this is not by coincidence. It's perfectly aligned, meaning something, meaning something great. And again, upon creation and talking about all of these great things that Africans were already doing before you had a European, before you had any book that anybody would follow, the Bible doesn't talk about that. It doesn't talk about prehistory, which lets you also know this is something that is completed more currently. This is not an old sacred book, because why doesn't it cover all this? It would have to talk about this, and some would say, oh, well, it's just a story, made later on, but it talks about the ancient world and you can find everything in it. No, you can't. I can't find this, so again, that tells you they missed something, and they missed a lot of things. So moving on here, just a global grid of monuments. You see some of the other pinpoint spots, some things that we talked about. One thing that's not on here, but being in Missouri, for those who know about the Missouri-Illinois border, the Cahokia Mountains, or where Cahokia is, these are old pyramid ruins in the Midwest, in Missouri. Some people say the Grand Canyon, was visited by the time of, Egyptians and that whole thing. And you can find, civilization ruins there and what's going on. So we had already been to America, whatever time we got here, we've been here. The ruins show you, and you see the other parts of the world where you have all of these monuments. And I think that that's just the African, basically pinpointing and navigating the stars in every area that he touched, letting you know that he was there first, and the same work you will see here, you're going to see on different parts of the world. See, nowhere really in European culture can you find monuments or statues or something historic that has great value or makes great sense in different parts of the world. Only Africans, left those ruins, and everything that Europeans claim, they lie about it. So it's something to really just think about. Everywhere we've been, we left the ruins and we left similarities, so who built it. Europeans can't show you that. Now, same book again. This is an Ankh. So this Ankh carved down again in South Africa. For those who wear Ankhs or know about the Ankh, we're going to break down the whole meaning of it here shortly. But once I break it down and explain to you what it really is, what I explain is what we need to be going off of, and it's what most people go off of who actually, wear this symbol. So I just want to keep us on code, because you have some Christians, wearing this symbol and not really understanding what it means. And it's okay. Christians, you can wear that, being, subscribed, as I like to say, to a certain religion does not keep you, from wearing certain pieces of jewelry or understanding history. But what I would like to say is if you put on our symbols, our ancient African symbols, then make sure you know and understand what they mean. And you're representing the same thing when you put that on, because that's sacred to us. So again, this symbol just showing, and appearing thousands of years ago, and Ankh inside the sun. So that shows you, life and that creation of life, with the sun, to the things on earth. So again, it just shows you that connection we had. Over here, you see a winged sun disk carved before Ma'at, before all of these other things. And you'll find this winged sun disk is going to end up in Sumerian culture, but this is African first, so it just shows you the path and pretty much connect the dots. But everything starts in the south. So ancient Kash, variation of ancient Kush, that we like to talk about a lot, is going to be one of the original names that's going to come about from those Africans, ancient Kash. And then you're going to get, Ta-Netcher, land of the creator, Ta-Kui, land of the spiritual ancestors, Ta-Nehisi, Ta-Seti, ancient Tia, Netaplaya, and then Nubia, Ta-Meri, meaning the beloved land, Simatawi, the united two lands, and then Kemet, the black nation state. So you got all of these different lands, kind of in an order. Some may be before one or another, but all going on here. And you see that in Sudan, in the majority of the Sudan, south of Egypt, so again, showing you those ruins and our people, our ancestor coming from the south. They always give homage to the south, and you're going to see that when we move far and farther into Egyptian history, homage paid to the south. So again, it's good to take notes and go look up and research each individual land, so you can actually see how far, back some of these go. You're talking, 40,000 years in cases, maybe 65,000 years in some cases before the flood, already names that made it over, and the high priest that kept that knowledge, and were able to pass it on, through their descendants, it survived and made it. So that's how we know these terms, that's how we can go find this history. It's still there. You just got to find, the right people to talk to. So moving on quickly. Then again, this is ruins of ancient Tia, or sometimes ancient Punt, in Ethiopia. And I picked this first picture here. If you right here, you can see the arms coming down and what it looks to be breasts coming from the sky. This is going to be your first depiction of Nut, or the great mother, the great universe, nursing the land that we are on, giving birth to animals, giving birth, to the humans, and this is what this is depicting way before we get to Nut in, Egypt culture, or, Kemetic culture, so you see this happening in the south first, this depiction here, the mother nursing the universe, nursing the people. And this picture in the middle and the other one, they're stones, pretty much, recorded hours, again, stellar movements, equinoxes, and the same thing you see here in the south. So again, making that perfect connection, that perfect pathway up, from Southern Africa to Central Africa, and when we get into Egypt. So it's all there. Go look up the ruins of Tia, ancient Ethiopia. Here's a couple more pictures right here, just some of the ruins when you have pyramids. And for those of you who don't know, there's more pyramids actually in Sudan and in the south than it is in Kemet or Egypt. So Egypt was going to be used for a purpose, that land there, and we're going to get into that shortly. But just showing you some ruins, and this is important too, family, just to get an idea of, we understood math, not only science and the stars that we were dealing with, I spoke on, but we understood math, we understood science, and the Ashango bone proves that. This is found in the Congo, the fibula of a baboon, about 20,000 years ago, and it's a number system, grouping numbers. Some say that it could have been a female tracking her cycle, or it could have been a female, tracking, other calendar objects or trying to deal with prime numbers and whole numbers. So there's a lot of different theories, but nevertheless, it is a mathematical instrument made out of a baboon bone. Now, the funny thing is baboons are indigenous to the South, Southern Africa, and we find the baboon in Northern Africa or in Kemet, which they deified, again, showing you that connection, but a lot of animals that end up in Kemet that become deified aren't indigenous to that area. They all come from the South. So again, that's showing you that connection. So sometimes it's good to go figure out what those animals were that you see in the paintings and in the temples and things like that to know where they come from. And then that tells you who the people are and how they're connected. So very deep, family. This is going to be the last slide before we move on to part 2. This is Katel Hook, and I just kind of threw that in there because this is a village in the Middle East, kind of in the Turkey area, Yemen, all over there, and goes back to about 6500 BC. And the reason why I'm pointing this out, because this is more closer to date, but this is known to be a majority all woman village. And this is 6500 BC, again, before the Greek, still before the Indian. The Chinese are, kind of there, the black Chinese, who founded those dynasties, the black Asians. But nevertheless, you still have in the midst of that, in the bridging gap, ancient civilizations kind of living underground too. And this isn't something new, but all women, and they kind of had a timeline displayed of when men pretty much were introduced to the village or they started to be being more produced in the village, one of the two. Or they could have just isolated themselves from men and beginning to build here. But all the statues that they found were of women, and other artifacts basically explain that, and finding them even sexually engaged, so again, we talk about homosexuality in these things. No, I don't agree that in today's state that it is natural. I do believe that it is a choice. I'm just one of those people, only because we've seen that behavior evolve, over time. When you go back to the 70s, the 80s and 90s, and being homosexual was just one of those things that if you were, it was kind of quiet, but people weren't coming out every day. There was no, huge big movement. But again, that's due to science being altered, babies getting immunization shots, the wrong kind. They tampered with your genetics. It's been proven that boys can grow breasts. They can alter, your chromosomes. They mess with your stem cells. They do a lot of different things that they can, produce changes in the body for experiments, and then, you have years later somebody who wants to become transgender. Now, I'm not saying that's for every case, nor am I, trying to offend anybody of LGBT in that community. I'm not here for that. I'm just stating fact and pretty much, my theory of it and what I observed of it. So we even see homosexuality in animals and in nature. Some animals, male and female, participate, bisexually or doing, homosexual acts. So it is something that, again, we go to the Bible and God talks about homosexuality here, there. They try to pinpoint and say, yeah, this is where they don't like it. But again, he had to create it. This is something that is natural because we see the animals doing it first. So it has to be created. So if it's so wrong, why would it be something that he would allow to happen anyway? And for some of those who are living hardcore by the Bible, technically to it, people who live that lifestyle, we're supposed to shun them or kill them, so there's so many people who follow this book but don't really live out those things, and we just accept everybody. So that kind of shows you too, just the craziness of it, because then you also have a lot of people who wrote the book, participated in it, and they don't follow anything in it. And some people say, no, nobody wrote it, that's God's book. Again, in episode 2, we're going to debunk that, and I will make sure that we don't leave no question to it, and we're going to get into this man-made book, and we're going to get into how it came to be. But again, as you see so far, family, I hope I didn't hurt anybody. We just keeping it real. We're delivering the facts, and I hope everything is going good. And I want you guys to join in for part 2 so we can get more into historical origins, and we can really dive into ancient Kemet, and that's where the wheels are going to really start rolling. Thanks again, family. Be on the lookout for part 2. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave a like in the video, and as always, follow the Midwest Black. You heard?